Marcus Reynolds stood at his office window on the 32nd floor of the Chicago Metropolitan Tower, watching the setting sun paint the city skyline in hues of amber and gold. At 52, he had everything a man could want: a successful career as a senior partner at Reynolds and Mitchell Investment Group, a beautiful home in the North Shore suburbs, and what he had always believed was a perfect marriage to Catherine, his wife of 25 years. The gentle buzz of his phone interrupted his reverie. It was a text from Catherine, "Working late again tonight. Don't wait up." Marcus smiled, appreciating how dedicated she was to her interior design business. Her recent success had been remarkable, with high-profile clients suddenly seeking her services. He was proud of how she'd built her reputation from scratch over the past year. "Hey, boss," called David Chen, his most trusted analyst, from the doorway. "Got a minute?" Marcus waved him in, still smiling. David had been more than just an employee over the past 5 years, he'd become a friend and confidant. At 35, David reminded Marcus of himself at that age: ambitious, sharp, and unfailingly loyal. "Catherine working late again?" David asked, settling into one of the leather chairs facing Marcus's desk. "Yeah, another big client apparently." Marcus sat down, loosening his tie. "How's Sarah doing with the pregnancy?" A shadow crossed David's face, so brief Marcus almost missed it. "She's good. Listen, Marcus, there's something I need to talk to you about. It's not about work." The serious tone in David's voice made Marcus lean forward. "Everything okay?" David's fingers drummed nervously on the armrest. "I've been debating whether to tell you this for weeks. Sarah noticed something last month at the Morton Steakhouse downtown. She was there with her sister, and..." He paused, running a hand through his hair. "She saw Catherine there. With James Morrison." Marcus felt a slight twinge of confusion. James Morrison was a real estate developer they'd done business with occasionally. They probably had a meeting about one of her projects. "She's been doing a lot of work with developers lately." David's expression tightened. "It didn't look like a business meeting, Marcus. They were in a private booth." Sarah said. He hesitated again. "She said they looked intimate. Very intimate." A cold sensation settled in Marcus's stomach, but he forced a laugh. "Come on, David. Catherine and I have been married 25 years. She's not the type." "I know how it sounds," David said quietly. "But there's more." Sarah took a picture because she couldn't believe what she was seeing. "I didn't want to show you, but..." He pulled out his phone, tapped the screen a few times, and handed it to Marcus. The photo was slightly grainy but clear enough. Catherine and James Morrison were indeed in a private booth. She was wearing a red dress Marcus had never seen before, leaning close to Morrison, their hands intertwined on the table. The intimacy was unmistakable. "The timestamp shows this was taken 3 weeks ago," David said softly. "On a Tuesday night when she said she was meeting with suppliers." Marcus stared at the photo, his world tilting sideways. 25 years of trust began to crack like thin ice under spring sun. He remembered all the late nights over the past year, the new clothes, the mysterious business meetings, the way she'd been guarding her phone. "There's something else," David added, his voice heavy with reluctance. "I had our IT guy do some digging. Morrison's company hasn't done any business with Catherine's firm. Not a single project." Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. All those client meetings, all those late nights. He thought about their anniversary dinner last month, how distracted she'd seemed, checking her phone every few minutes. "I'm sorry, Marcus," David said, standing up. "I couldn't keep this from you. You've been too good to me, to all of us. You deserve to know." As David left the office, Marcus sat in growing darkness, his mind racing through the past year. How had he missed the signs? The sudden success of her business, the mysterious new clients, the changes in her behavior, it all took on a sinister new meaning. His phone buzzed again. Another text from Catherine: "Might need to go out of town next weekend for a client meeting. We'll tell you more tonight." Marcus stared at the message, his hands shaking slightly. The perfect life he believed in was starting to look like an elaborate illusion, and somewhere in the gathering darkness of his office, something cold and hard began to take root in his heart. He opened his laptop and began to type. It was time to know everything, every detail, every lie, every betrayal. And then he would decide what to do about it. The Chicago skyline had turned black now, dotted with thousands of lights that seemed to mock the darkness growing inside him. Marcus Reynolds, the man who had everything, was about to discover just how quickly everything could turn into nothing at all. The house felt different when Marcus arrived home that night. Every familiar object, the family photos lining the hallway, Catherine's designer throw pillows on the couch, even the faint scent of her perfume lingering in the air, seemed to mock him with memories he now questioned. 25 years of shared life suddenly felt like an elaborate stage set, with him as the unsuspecting audience. He found himself studying their wedding photo on the mantelpiece. Catherine's smile, once a source of warmth, now seemed to hold secrets he'd been too blind to see. His fingers traced the silver frame, remembering how young and in love they'd been. Had it all been a lie? Or had something changed along the way? The sound of keys in the door made his heart race. He quickly settled into his usual spot in the living room, laptop open, trying to appear normal despite the storm raging inside him. "Hi, honey," Catherine called out, her heels clicking against the hardwood floors. She appeared in the doorway, stunning in a navy business suit he'd never seen before. At 48, she was still beautiful, turning heads wherever she went. How many of those heads belonged to men like James Morrison? "How was your day?" he asked, proud of how steady his voice sounded. "Exhausting," she sighed, dropping her designer bag on the counter. The client meeting ran late, and then traffic was horrible. She walked over and kissed his cheek, and Marcus caught a whiff of unfamiliar cologne mixed with her usual perfume. "The Morrison project?" he asked casually, watching her reaction. Catherine's hand paused for just a fraction of a second as she reached for a wine glass. "No, this is a new client. Actually, that's what I wanted to talk to you about. I might need to go to New York next weekend for a consultation." The lie rolled off her tongue so smoothly that Marcus felt sick. How many other lies had she told him with that same easy confidence? "Sounds important," he said, his laptop screen reflecting the surveillance footage he'd pulled from his office building's security system. There she was, entering the building 2 weeks ago, not to surprise him for lunch as she'd claimed, but heading straight to Morrison's office on the 40th floor. She'd stayed for 2 hours. "It could be a big contract," she continued, pouring herself a generous glass of red wine. "The client has multiple properties they want redesigned." Marcus nodded, remembering David's words about Morrison's company having no official business with Catherine's firm. "You've been getting a lot of big contracts lately." "Well, word of mouth is everything in this business," she smiled, settling onto the couch beside him. One satisfied client leads to another. He wondered if she could hear the double meaning in her own words. "Speaking of satisfied clients," he said carefully, "how's the Morton Steakhouse renovation going?" This time, the pause was unmistakable. "Morton's? Didn't you mention doing some work for them? I thought I remembered you talking about a meeting there." Catherine took a long sip of wine. "Oh, that. No, it didn't work out. They went with another designer." Marcus felt something break inside him, not with a crash, but with the quiet devastation of snow sliding off a roof. He'd given her a chance to be honest, and she'd chosen to lie. Again. "I should get some work done," she said, standing up. "Don't wait up for me." As she disappeared upstairs, Marcus pulled out his phone and opened his banking app. He'd spent the afternoon tracing financial records, and what he'd found had turned his stomach. A secret credit card in Catherine's name, linked to their joint account. Hotel charges. Expensive restaurants. Jewelry stores. A pattern of deception laid bare in monthly statements and credit card receipts. His phone buzzed with a text from David, "Got the information you asked for. Morrison's definitely involved in something bigger. You need to see this." Marcus stared at the message, then at the stairs where Catherine had vanished. The woman he'd loved for half his life was now a stranger, and with each passing hour, the stranger was becoming more dangerous. He opened his laptop again and began documenting everything, every lie, every suspicious meeting, every unexplained expense. As he worked, he could hear Catherine upstairs, probably texting Morrison, planning their next rendezvous, laughing at how easily she'd fooled her trusting husband. But Marcus Reynolds wasn't feeling very trusting anymore. The successful, confident investment banker was transforming into something else, something driven by a cold, calculating need to understand the full scope of this betrayal. And as he dug deeper, he began to suspect that Catherine's affair with Morrison was just the tip of a much darker iceberg. Upstairs, he heard the shower running. Catherine was washing away the evidence of her day, unaware that her carefully constructed world of lies was about to come crashing down. Marcus saved his files, encrypted them, and sent copies to secure storage. Tomorrow, he would meet with David and learn just how deep this betrayal went. The night stretched ahead, full of secrets and lies, but Marcus no longer felt lost. He felt focused, determined, and increasingly certain that Catherine's betrayal wasn't just personal, it was part of something much more sinister. And he was going to expose every last bit of it, no matter the cost. The morning light filtered through the windows of David's modest apartment in Lincoln Park, casting long shadows across the scattered papers covering his dining room table. Marcus sat quietly, processing what he'd just learned, while David paced nervously behind him. "I almost didn't believe it at first," David said, running his fingers through his disheveled hair. "But the numbers don't lie, Marcus. Morrison's been using Catherine's design firm to launder money from his real estate developments. The fake contracts, the inflated invoices, it's all there." Marcus picked up another document, his hands steady despite the trembling in his chest. Bank statements, wire transfers, shell companies, the evidence was overwhelming. Catherine wasn't just having an affair, she was an active participant in a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme. "The timing matches perfectly," David continued, pointing to a spreadsheet. Catherine's business started booming right when Morrison's overseas investors began asking questions about their returns. He needed a way to move money around without raising suspicions, and your wife's legitimate business provided the perfect cover. Marcus thought about their recent vacation to the Maldives, the new car Catherine had insisted on buying, the expensive renovations to their lake house. All paid for with dirty money. All part of the lie. "There's something else," David said quietly, sliding an envelope across the table. "Sarah followed Catherine yesterday." Inside were photos, Catherine entering a private banking office downtown, emerging 2 hours later with a sleek briefcase. More photos showed her meeting Morrison at a quiet cafe, their heads close together as they examined documents. The final image made Marcus's blood run cold, Catherine leaving a law office, one that specialized in offshore accounts and international tax law. "She's planning something, Marcus. Something big. The money transfers have been increasing, and yesterday." David hesitated. "Yesterday, she contacted a divorce attorney." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. Marcus closed his eyes, remembering their last anniversary. Catherine had insisted on updating their wills, claiming it was just good financial planning. Now he understood, she'd been laying groundwork. "She's going to try to take everything," Marcus said softly, the realization hitting him like a physical blow. "The money, the houses, the company shares I put in her name, she and Morrison probably planned this from the start." David sat down heavily across from him. "There's worse. Morrison's got connections with some dangerous people overseas. The kind who don't take kindly to losing their investments. If this scheme falls apart. She's playing with fire, Marcus muttered, remembering Catherine's casual mention of her upcoming business trip to New York. And she's going to get burned. His phone buzzed, a text from Catherine, working late again tonight. Don't forget about my New York trip this weekend. Love you. The casual, love you, felt like acid on his skin. How many times had she texted those same words while sitting across from Morrison, planning to destroy everything Marcus had spent his life building? What are you going to do? David asked, watching him carefully. Marcus stood up, walking to the window. Chicago sprawled before him, the city where he'd built his life, his reputation, his fortune. The city where Catherine was now systematically dismantling it all. First, he said, his voice taking on a steel edge, I'm going to protect what's mine. Transfer documents, backup accounts, everything we need to preserve the company's assets. Then. He turned back to David, his expression hardened by resolve. Then I'm going to give Catherine exactly what she wants, a chance to show her true colors. Marcus, David said hesitantly, be careful. If Morrison realizes you know. Oh, I'll be careful, Marcus replied, a cold smile playing at his lips. I learned from the best, didn't I? Catherine's been playing a role for months. Now it's my turn. He gathered the documents, securing them in his briefcase. Set up a meeting with Simon in IT. I want everything, emails, phone records, security footage. And find out what you can about Catherine's New York trip. Something tells me she's not planning to look at furniture samples. As Marcus drove home, his mind worked with mechanical precision. Catherine had chosen her battlefield, money, power, reputation. She thought she was destroying him piece by piece, but she'd made one critical mistake, she'd underestimated just how dangerous a man could become when he had nothing left to lose. His phone buzzed again, another text from Catherine, picked up your favorite wine for dinner tonight. Miss you. Marcus smiled grimly. Let her play her games. Let her think she was still in control. The woman who'd shared his bed for 25 years was about to learn a harsh lesson about trust and betrayal. And when the dust settled, only one of them would be left standing. The sun was setting over Lake Michigan as he pulled into their driveway, casting long shadows that seemed to point accusingly at their perfect suburban home. Inside, Catherine would be waiting, wearing her mask of devotion, never suspecting that her carefully constructed house of cards was about to come crashing down. Marcus straightened his tie, checked his reflection in the rearview mirror, and practiced his loving husband smile. The game was on, and he intended to play it to the bitter end. The family photos still lined the hallway of their home, but now they told a different story to Marcus. Each smiling image of Catherine felt like a masterclass in deception. He found himself studying her eyes in each picture, wondering when the woman he'd loved had become this stranger who wore his wife's face. That evening, as rain pelted against the windows, Marcus sat in his home office, surrounded by the ghosts of his marriage. On his computer screen, a series of emails between Catherine and Morrison painted a picture that made his chest ache. Their relationship hadn't started as a simple affair, it had been calculated from the beginning. Your husband's reputation is the perfect cover, Morrison had written 18 months ago. No one questions the wife of Marcus Reynolds. You're invisible to them, which makes you perfect for this. Marcus closed his eyes, remembering the dinner party where he'd first introduced them. Catherine had seemed almost reluctant to speak with Morrison that night. Now he understood, they'd been playing their parts, creating a public history that would stand up to scrutiny. A soft knock at his office door made him quickly close the emails. Catherine stood there, wrapped in the silk robe he'd given her for Christmas, holding 2 glasses of wine. You've been working so hard lately, she said softly, approaching his desk. I thought you could use a break. Marcus accepted the wine, watching as she perched on the edge of his desk, a familiar gesture that used to make his heart race. Now it felt like watching an actress perform a well-rehearsed scene. I've been thinking about us, she continued, reaching out to touch his hand. We've both been so busy lately. Maybe after my New York trip, we should take some time off. Just the two of us. The tenderness in her voice made something inside him crack. Was any of it real? Had she ever loved him, or had he simply been useful, first for his social status, then for his business connections, and now as unwitting cover for her crimes? That sounds nice, he replied, squeezing her hand gently. Tell me more about this New York trip. As Catherine launched into her carefully constructed story about client meetings and design consultations, Marcus thought about what he discovered that afternoon. The business trip was actually a meeting with a private banker who specialized in moving assets offshore. Catherine and Morrison had already begun transferring millions through a complex network of shell companies. You seem distracted, Catherine said, interrupting his thoughts. Is everything okay at work? Marcus met her concerned gaze, marveling at her performance. Just thinking about the past, he said truthfully. Do you remember our first apartment? That tiny place in Lincoln Park? Something flickered in Catherine's eyes, a genuine emotion that caught him off guard. Of course. You used to bring me coffee in bed every Sunday morning, even though we could barely afford decent coffee. For a moment, the mask slipped, and Marcus caught a glimpse of the woman he'd fallen in love with. It made what he had to do next even harder. I miss those days sometimes, he said softly. Everything seemed simpler then. Catherine's hand tightened on his briefly before she stood. We've built a good life, Marcus. Everything we have, we earned together. She leaned down and kissed his cheek. Don't work too late. As her footsteps faded down the hall, Marcus opened his laptop again and sent a coded message to David, start phase 1 tomorrow. The response came quickly, are you sure? Once we begin. Marcus looked at the family photo on his desk, he and Catherine on their 20th anniversary, her smile radiant as she held on to his arm. 5 years ago. Before Morrison. Before the lies. Before she'd decided to destroy everything they'd built together. I'm sure, he typed back. She leaves for New York in 3 days. That's our window. He sat back, sipping the wine Catherine had brought him. In their bedroom upstairs, he could hear her getting ready for bed, probably texting Morrison about how perfectly her devoted husband was playing his part. Let her think she had him fooled. Let her believe she was in control. Because in 3 days, Catherine would board a plane to New York, confident that her careful plans were falling into place. She didn't know that Marcus had already spoken to the FBI's Financial Crimes Unit, or that Morrison's overseas investors were starting to ask very pointed questions about their missing money. Most importantly, she didn't know that her loving husband had spent the past week systematically dismantling her escape route, piece by piece. Marcus finished his wine and began shutting down his computer for the night. Upstairs, Catherine was waiting in their bed, playing the role of faithful wife one last time. He would play his part too, the trusting husband, blind to betrayal, unaware of the storm about to break. But in the quiet of his office, surrounded by memories of a life that was built on lies, Marcus made a silent promise to himself. When this was over, when every layer of Catherine's deception was exposed, he would make sure she understood exactly what it felt like to lose everything you'd ever loved. The morning before Catherine's planned trip to New York dawned cold and gray. Marcus stood in their walk-in closet, watching her pack while pretending to select a tie for work. Her elegant hands folded designer clothes into an expensive suitcase, clothes bought with money that represented so many lies. You're quiet this morning, Catherine said, glancing up at him with what appeared to be genuine concern. Are you sure you're okay with me going to New York? I could postpone. The tender note in her voice made his chest tighten. Even now, knowing everything, part of him wanted to believe in her, to accept the comfort she offered. It was this vulnerability that had kept him blind for so long. No, you should go, he said softly. Your career is important. He selected a deep blue tie, Catherine's favorite. Besides, it's only for a few days. She smiled, crossing the closet to adjust his tie with practiced intimacy. Her perfume, the same scent she'd worn on their first date, enveloped him. "You're too good to me, Marcus." If she noticed how his hands trembled slightly, she gave no sign. Marcus thought about the phone call he'd received from David an hour earlier. "FBI's ready. Morrison's overseas partners are demanding answers." It's all falling into place. Catherine's phone buzzed on the dresser. Marcus caught her slight hesitation before checking it, saw the flash of worry cross her face before she masked it with a smile. "Just the airline confirming my flight," she said smoothly. But he'd seen the name on the screen, James Morrison. "I'll miss you," he said, the words tasting like ashes in his mouth. "Promise you'll call when you land?" She kissed him then, and for a moment, Marcus felt the weight of 25 years of shared life, of love that had somehow twisted into this toxic mirror image of itself. "Of course I will. I always do." As Catherine finished packing, Marcus retreated to his study, ostensibly to handle some work emails. In reality, he was monitoring the carefully orchestrated chain of events he'd set in motion. First came the text from his contact at the FBI, search warrant approved for Morrison's offices. Moving at 2 p.m. Then an email from David, overseas investors received the documentation. They're not happy. Multiple calls coming into Morrison's office. Finally, a message from Simon in IT, all electronic transfers from the specified accounts have been flagged and frozen, per federal authorities. She won't be able to move any more money. Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the weight of what was to come. The woman upstairs, carefully packing her bags for a trip she would never complete, had no idea that her world was about to implode. Part of him ached at the thought of her fear when she realized everything was falling apart. Another part, the part that had died a little with each discovered lie, waited with grim satisfaction. "Honey." Catherine called from upstairs. "Could you help me with something?" He found her in their bedroom, struggling with the clasp of a necklace, his anniversary gift from 2 years ago. "Let me," he said, stepping behind her. In the mirror, they looked like the perfect couple, the successful businessman, the beautiful wife. But mirrors could lie just as easily as people. As his fingers worked the delicate clasp, Marcus caught Catherine's gaze in the reflection. "I love you," she said softly, reaching up to touch his hand. "You know that, right?" The question hung in the air between them, heavy with unspoken truths. Did she love him? Had she ever? Or was he simply the foundation she'd built her house of lies upon? "I know," he replied, and watched her smile, believing she still held all the cards. His phone buzzed, another update from David. Everything was proceeding according to plan. In less than 4 hours, federal agents would raid Morrison's offices. Overseas investors would demand answers about their missing millions. And Catherine's carefully constructed escape route would vanish like morning mist. "Your car to the airport will be here soon," he said, helping her with her suitcase. "Are you sure you have everything?" Catherine nodded, checking her phone one last time. "Perfect timing. I should go freshen up before the car arrives." As she disappeared into the bathroom, Marcus stood in their bedroom, surrounded by the artifacts of their shared life. Photos, mementos, tokens of love that now felt like props in an elaborate play. Soon, very soon, the curtain would fall on Catherine's performance. He touched the framed photo on her nightstand, their wedding day, both of them young and full of dreams. "I loved you," he whispered to the smiling bride in the image. "I loved you enough to destroy everything, just to find the truth." Downstairs, a car horn sounded. Catherine emerged from the bathroom, perfect and poised, ready for her final act. She had no idea that her carefully planned trip to New York would end before it began, or that the next time she saw their bedroom, it would be through eyes opened by the harsh light of exposure and consequences. Marcus picked up her suitcase, playing his role one last time. In a few hours, everything would change. But for now, he would be the devoted husband, sending his beloved wife off on a business trip, keeping his shattered heart hidden behind a mask of trust she had taught him to wear. The airport departure terminal buzzed with its usual afternoon energy, but Marcus felt strangely detached from it all as he watched Catherine check in for her flight. She was wearing the cream-colored suit he'd always loved, her composure perfect as she handed over her ID and ticket. "Security shouldn't take too long," she said, turning to him with a smile. "You didn't have to wait with me." 25 years, Marcus replied softly. "I've never not seen you off." Something flickered in Catherine's eyes, perhaps a trace of genuine emotion, or maybe just another practiced performance. She reached up to straighten his tie one last time, her fingers lingering on his chest. "You're a good man, Marcus. I've always known that." The words hit him like physical blows, each syllable weighted with years of deception. Behind them, the airport's massive windows offered a view of gathering storm clouds, nature providing a fitting backdrop for what was about to unfold. "Mrs. Reynolds." A serious-looking man in a dark suit approached them, flanked by two others. "I'm Agent Cooper with the FBI. We need you to come with us." The change in Catherine's expression was subtle, a slight widening of the eyes, a barely perceptible tightening of her shoulders. But Marcus, who had studied every nuance of her face over the past weeks, saw the moment realization hit. "There must be some mistake," she said, her voice steady but her hand gripping her designer handbag tighter. "I have a flight to catch." "No mistake, Mrs. Reynolds," Agent Cooper replied, producing a warrant. "We have some questions about certain financial transactions between your design firm and James Morrison's companies." Catherine's mask slipped then, just for a moment, as she turned to Marcus. The look in her eyes, a complex mixture of shock, betrayal, and something that might have been respect, would haunt him for years to come. "You knew," she whispered. Marcus met her gaze steadily. "I learned from the best, Catherine. You taught me how to play a role, how to smile while hiding the truth. Consider it your last gift to me." The terminal had grown quieter, travelers instinctively giving them space as the drama unfolded. Catherine's phone buzzed insistently, probably Morrison, discovering that his own world was crumbling as federal agents swept through his offices. "Mr. Reynolds," Agent Cooper said quietly, "we'll need you to come with us as well. We have some questions about your role in uncovering this operation." Catherine's composure cracked further. "Marcus, please. Whatever you think you know." "I know everything," he interrupted gently. "The money laundering. The offshore accounts. The plans to leave me penniless while you and Morrison disappeared with millions. I know how long you've been planning this, how carefully you constructed every lie." He stepped closer, his voice dropping so only she could hear. "What I don't know, Catherine, is if any of it was ever real. If you ever truly loved me, or if I was just convenient for your plans." Tears filled her eyes, real ones this time, not the carefully crafted displays she'd perfected over the years. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," she whispered. "At first, with James, it was just business. Then things changed, and I couldn't find a way out." "There's always a way out," Marcus replied. "You just have to be willing to face the truth." As the agents led Catherine away, her perfect posture finally breaking under the weight of exposure, Marcus felt no triumph, no satisfaction, only a deep, aching sadness for everything that had been lost. 25 years of memories, tainted now by the knowledge of betrayal. A love story that had become a cautionary tale. His phone buzzed with a message from David, "Morrison's in custody. Overseas investors are cooperating with the investigation. You're clear." Marcus watched until Catherine disappeared around a corner, her cream-colored suit a final flash of elegance before she vanished from his life. The storm outside had broken, rain streaming down the massive windows, washing away the last traces of a life built on carefully constructed lies. He thought about the house they'd shared, the photos on the walls, the memories stored in every corner. It would all need to be packed away, sorted through, decisions made about what to keep and what to let go. But that was for another day. For now, Marcus Reynolds stood alone in the airport terminal, feeling the weight of truth settle around his shoulders. He had survived betrayal, faced deception with courage, and emerged stronger for having known the cost of blind trust. Outside, the storm continued to rage, but inside, a different kind of peace was taking hold. It wasn't happiness, that would take time, and healing, and perhaps years of learning to trust again. But it was something equally valuable, the quiet satisfaction of having faced the truth, no matter how painful, and chosen to rise above betrayal rather than be destroyed by it. Marcus adjusted his tie, the blue one Catherine had always loved, and walked toward the exit. Behind him, a plane took off into the storm-darkened sky, carrying other people's dreams and destinations. His own journey, he realized, was just beginning.